Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is Amna Gul from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. We're studying communication skills for media. It's our 6th lecture and the topic is planning for presentations. Presenting information clearly and effectively is a key skill in getting your message across. Today, presentation skills are required in almost every field, and most of us are required to give presentations on occasions. While some people take this in their stride, others find it much more challenging. It is, however, possible to improve your presentation skills with a bit of smart work. I don't mean hard work, rather smart work. I acknowledge that many people feel terrified when asked to talk in public, especially to bigger groups. However, these fears can be reduced by good planning, which will also lay the foundation for making an effective presentation. Effective presentations usually require planning and presentation, although this need not take very long. Planning is the most important part of making a successful presentation. Today, I'll be explaining what information you need before you can really start to plan your presentation and decide what you are going to say. The most important aspects include selection of the topic of the presentation, analyzing the audience, and clearly defining objective of the presentation. I understand that preparing a presentation can be an overwhelming experience if you allow it to be one. I repeat, it can be an overwhelming experience only if you yourself allow it to be one. The strategies and steps being discussed will help you break down what you might view as a large job into smaller, more manageable tasks. And this is what smart work is all about. Presentations are not just limited to your in-class presentations. Rather, this term umbrellas a variety of opportunities whereby you have to speak in public or speak to a group of people. For example, when you have to make a speech at an event, for example, at a departmental party. When you, on behalf of your whole class, say goodbye to a teacher leaving the department for good. Or when you propose an excursion trip to your chairman at the department. When you seek investment, loan, or even approval for a new business endeavor. Or even when you brief a group of guests about the practical work of radiocast. It's still a presentation when you present your thesis proposal to the departmental academic committee. Even though all the options I have mentioned can be considered presentations, they do not, however, all require the same approach. You would not, for example, use PowerPoint to bid farewell to a teacher. However, an audience of your department teachers would be somewhat surprised not to see slides projected onto a screen when you present your thesis proposal. It follows therefore, that there is no single set of rules that apply to all presentations. There are, however, some things that every presentation opportunity has in common. These include: you will present better if you prepared effectively. This does not necessarily mean that you have written out your speech verbatim and rehearsed it until you know it off by heart, although that might work for some people. It does, however, mean that you have to be confident that you are saying the right thing in the right way to the right audience. You need to be clear about your audience and your message. Every presentation will be better if you have clearly considered the message that you want to or need to convey and how best to convey it to your audience. These two pieces of information derive your style, structure, content, and use of visual aids. You must never overrun your allocated time. In other words, don't outstay your welcome. Almost every speech or presentation is better if it is shorter. Nobody minds finishing before they expected to do so. However, everybody minds being held up. So the first step is the selection of topic for presentation. If possible, select a topic that is of interest to you and the audience. It will be much easier to deliver a presentation that the audience finds relevant, and it would be more enjoyable for you to research a topic that is of interest to you. If you're allotted a topic, as is the case in your university presentations, make sure that you find an angle that is interesting to your audience. If you were asked to speak to students of journalism and mass communication, and you were given the freedom to choose a topic of your choice, would it be a good option if you kept just your interest in mind and decided to talk about, for example, stereotypes, thinking outside the box, national and cultural values? Even though all these topics may be of interest to you, but these aren't supposed to be interesting to undergraduates pursuing education and media studies. You need to make these relevant to the audience at hand. For example, rather than discussing stereotypes, it's better to change the topic to mass media and stereotypes. Similarly, thinking outside the box may not be as appropriate a choice as setting new trends in media industry is. Thus, discussing national and cultural values would become far more interesting and relevant if discussed under the head of soft power, as it is very relevant and concurrent to media studies. If you were asked to give a presentation on diffusion of innovation theory, how would you make it relevant? The theory typically has examples from agriculture sector, for example, about diffusion and adoption of tractors. Would it be appropriate to give this example as explanation to students of media studies? Would they find it relevant and interesting? No. A big no. It would be far better if theories presented using the example of cultural diffusion via YouTube. This would not only make the topic relevant, but also interesting and thus easier to understand. The same theory, if being presented to students of business studies, can be made relevant by discussing case studies of diffusion of fashion trends. This is one of the basic principles, and understanding this principle leads to planning a relevant roadmap for your presentation. The next step in preparing a presentation is to learn more about the audience to whom you will be speaking. It's a good idea to obtain some information on the backgrounds, values, interests of your audience, so that you understand what the audience members might expect from your presentation. Of the audience, A stands for analysis, which is the expected size of the group of audience. U for understanding. Does your audience know something about your subject already, or will it be totally new to them? You need to understand this thing. The D for demographics, for example, the age range. A talk aimed at faculty members will be quite different from one aimed at university students. Or gender. Will the audience be predominantly male or female? Education background, and so on. I for interest. Would your audience be attending because they would be told to do so? For example, when your teacher asks you to attend a certain presentation or a seminar, or would be there out of their own interest. E for environment. You need to visualize where will you as the presenter stand. Would the audience be able to see and hear you? And for needs. What are the needs of the audience? What are the needs of you as the speaker? Customized. What specific needs do you need to address? For example, are you there to inform, to teach, to stimulate, or to provoke? Finally, E for expectations. What does the audience expect to learn or hear from you as the presenter? You need to focus your presentation on the audience. Your presentation is not about how much you can say, but about how much your audience can understand. For example, analysis of audience size leads to plan the format. In small groups, you can have interactive sessions or activities, but this is not possible in larger groups, for example, of over 500 people. Understanding the level of prior knowledge of audience on the subject makes you plan to include which level of basic information to include. For example, when talking about PowerPoints, do you need to explain what the term PowerPoint presentation means? Demographic information helps at setting the tone, flow, and angle of presentation. As explained earlier in the example of diffusion of innovation theory, that you need to plan it according to the audience. Interest factor helps in analyzing the motivation of the audience to comprehend the topic to be presented. Prior information on environment helps in visualizing the presenter's placement, seating arrangement, etc., and thus helps you to plan appropriately. Knowledge of needs, both of audience and presenter, is the first step towards fulfilling those needs. Unless you know the needs, how are you going to fulfill those? Since one size does not fit all, so presentations on the same topic still need to be customized and tailored as per the audience. If you were, as we have already discussed in the case of diffusion of innovation theory, if it is to be presented to students of media studies, it is tailored differently, and if it is presented to the students of business studies, it is planned out differently. Finally, an understanding of audience expectation leads to maneuvering the presentation to fulfill those expectations within the given resources. Whenever you are asked to give a presentation or speech to a group of people, you need to start by asking the objective or purpose of the presentation. In other words, what is the presentation expected to achieve, and what outcomes do the audience and the organizers expect? Organizers, in your case, are your teachers who arrange your class presentations and evaluate your presentations. Thus, you need to understand what outcomes your teacher desires to achieve from your presentation. These outcomes will shape your presentation because it must be designed to achieve the objective and deliver the desired outcome. Once you have selected a topic, write the objective of the presentation in a single, concise statement. The objective needs to specify exactly what you want your audience to learn from your presentation. Base the objective and the level of the content on the amount of time you have for the presentation and the background knowledge of the audience. Use this statement to help keep you focused as you research and develop the presentation. As you prepare your presentation, make sure you keep asking yourself, how is saying this going to help to achieve the objective and outcomes? Have you ever thought over why do your teachers ask you to give presentations on certain topics? You can end up scoring the highest if you understand what outcome does your teacher want. Does your teacher want you to teach the topic to your fellow students? Or does your teacher want you to provide a detailed and in-depth copy-paste of the topic? Or is your teacher interested in you displaying your PowerPoint skills? Does your teacher want you to display your communication skills? You need to ask yourself as many questions as you feel like. In my case, I want you to display your learning of presentation skills by reflecting on your grasp of the topic allotted to you. This is what I want to achieve from your presentations. Presentations require a good deal of planning. Scholars estimate that approximately 50% of all mistakes in an oral presentation actually occur in the planning stage, or rather, lack of the planning stage. And finally, being asked to give a presentation is an honor, not a chore. You are representing your organization or yourself or your department or your class fellows. You are not a presenter by right, but by invitation. It is therefore important that you put in the time and effort to ensure that you deliver what your audience wants. The most important tip of all, however, is to remember that it's all about your audience. Keep that in mind, and your presentation skills will almost instantly improve. That's all from my side. Thanks for lending an ear.